Welcome to News from Quiet Places, the show that brings you stories from the corners of the world that too often go unheard. Each episode we travel across Asia, Africa and Pacific to spotlight voices, events and moments that rarely make the front page, but matter just as much. I'm your host Mikhailo, and together we will discover the news shaping lives far from the usual headlines with clarity, respect and curiosity. Let's begin. Story 1. South African women protest gender-based violence ahead of G20. Hundreds of women in Johannesburg held a 15-minute lie-down protest in a public park, dressed all in black to symbolize the roughly 15 women who die from gender-based violence in South Africa every day. The protest comes just before the G20 summit, putting pressure on the government to make gender-based violence a top priority. Why it matters? As South Africa hosts its first G20 summit, this is a powerful demand. Global leaders are gathering, but local lived crisis remains urgent and deadly. Story 2. UN Secretary General's G20 warning. Now is the time for leadership. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres addressed G20 leaders in Johannesburg, calling the moment a tumultuous conflict, climate crisis, rising inequality, debt burdens and collapsing aid. He emphasized the G20's central role. The world's largest economies can ease suffering, share prosperity and help set a better, more peaceful course for the future. Why it matters? With the first G20 on African soil, Guterres is framing this as more than a summit, a potential turning point for global solidarity, not just among rich economies but with developing nations. Story 3. COP30 standoff. Finance dominates the deadlock. As COP30 climate talks in Belém approach their close, financial divisions remain sharp. Developing countries are pushing hard for more and more predictable climate finance, especially for adaptation. There is growing frustration over unmet pledges, and a climate debt narrative is resurfacing. Many argue that richer countries owe developing ones compensation for decades of emissions-driven growth. Why it matters? For many nations in Africa and Asia, climate change is not just an environmental issue, it's existential. The outcome of COP30 could influence billions in support for adaptation and resilience. Thank you for listening to News from Quiet Places. If you enjoyed today's journey through the overlooked and underreported, be sure to follow the show and share it with someone who loves discovering the world beyond usual news cycle. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind and keep your eyes on the quiet places, because that's where the real stories often begin.